So this is a year-end webinar for Visual ContrAcct. My name is Carrie, and I will be presenting this for you today. On our website, if you guys want to follow along with documentation, we have posted all the documents that are necessary for the year-end on our website, which is www.jobcost.com. And once you get to the website, if you go to News, the heading of News, this is where you'll see we've posted the 2020 federal and state tax changes for Visual ContrAcct. We've got instructions for year-end, and we also have instructions for entering FFCRA wages on the W-2, which is something new that we just discovered a couple of weeks ago, that you need to put the COVID-19 sick pay on the box 14 of the employee's W-2. So we're going to start first with this year-end instructions here. And it will give you what we had sent out in an email. The instructions that we send out every year shows you the new items that we have in our system. The new items this year is the 1099 NEC form and the revised 1099 miscellaneous form. Those two changes have been made in our software, and that's part of the update that everybody got a notification on that is needed to get these changes. Now, that update does not have to be done prior to you closing the year. You can close the year without having this update. The 1094, 1095C files are also new. They're new every year. That is also going to be part of the update. If you do file those, we do have crystal reports that you will need to get, we will need to send to you as part of the update. The 941 form has changed. It changed in the second quarter, and then it changed again in the third quarter. The third quarter one we did not have available because we did not know about it in time. And so we now have it available for the fourth quarter. You were still able to file the second quarter form into the third quarter. So the change the new form is not going to affect the fact that you didn't have it, but you will have it with this new update. So the new NEC forms in our system, it's File, Accounts Payable, Vendors. On page 2 of the vendor file, where you have the 1099 code box, the drop-down arrow now has a new field. These are all called now MIS because they show on the MIS form. And there's a new NEC 01, which is non-employee compensation. Now, that form just has one box for extra earnings or non-employee earnings. And then it has a box for federal tax withheld on those earnings. So when you got the update to add this option into your software, anybody that you had marked as a miscellaneous box 7 originally is now going to be changed to NEC 01 automatically by the update. The update automatically goes in and changes everybody to be the non-employee compensation NEC 01 value if it was on box 7. Miscellaneous box 7 is now a checkbox on the new form about making direct sales of $5,000 or more of consumer products. The new NEC form oh, that's 2021. Now, the government is so efficient, they already have the new forms for 2021, but we are using the 2020 form this year, which looks a little different. So this is the way the new NEC form looks like our information will go in box 1 here. And then if there's any federal income tax, it will go in box 4. Now, we do not have a spot to input federal income tax currently and from our software. That is not something that we ever put on the 1099 miss form. I believe that they are going to program for that. If you guys need to use that, I'm just not sure when it's going to be ready. So this is what the new form will look like for the non-employee. When you go to print this form, you will do it under Reports, Accounts Payable, and there's a new option here of 1099 NEC forms. This will print on the 2020 form. And it brings up the dialog box. This is a demo company that does not have updated data in it, but if you leave it for the year of 2019, it will not print the form. You'll get a message that it must be equal or greater than, the year must be equal or greater to 2020. So if you put in 2020 here and the amount is still greater than or equal to $600, you will get a display of any vendors that you paid over that amount to that have been marked for NEC01. And then this will print on you load these forms into your printer and you would print these. Now, in addition, the 1096 form then has changed, and that is a crystal report, because now there is a box for NEC01 or NEC forms. So that is also something else that you will need, and we will be contacting you, letting you know that it's available, and we will send it out to you. Now, you would still be able to print your 1099 forms if you have 1099 for other things other than non-employee compensation. Again, a change that they made in the program is that you cannot go back and print last year's forms anymore from our software because the form has changed and they didn't want to maintain 2 different forms. So it must be equal to 2020. And then the change on this form is they took away that box, but it is similar to this where box 7 is now this little checkbox here. And so if there is no option to mark an employee as the old miscellaneous box 7, that no longer is an option in the software. Anyone that was marked that after the update is changed to the new NEC01 on the employee file or the vendor file. If you didn't get the update, then apparently the forms will still run the way they used to, but you will not be able to print the new NEC form. Okay, so if you had to do 1094, 95Cs last year, you probably will have to do them again this year. Also, you have to look for any special reporting like group term life insurance, sick pay, auto usage. We do have documents that tell you how to do that in our system. There are your instructions that I have up on the other side of my screen now. We have bonus check instructions, auto use instructions, group term life insurance, taxable third-party sick pay when the employees got paid by a third-party insurance company for time off for workers' comp, non-taxable sick pay. This is cost of employers' health insurance coverage, which was part of your instructions for closing the year. Most employers would have to show the cost of employer-sponsored health coverage. You can do it as a one-time entry for the year, or there are instructions to record the amount per pay period. That employer-sponsored health coverage is usually if you are filing 250 or more W-2 forms. I have not been able to tell if that is still the case or if that was the case in previous years. So I'm assuming it's still going to be the case now. So those instructions are attached to this email right here, which records the amount per pay period. or do it one-time entry at the end of the year. If you need to record S Corp for your owners, whether it be taxable, that's usually done as the last entry for the year. And there's instructions for taxable S Corp. And we also have instructions for non-FICA taxable S Corp. Any of these instructions we can, and there's a 125 dependent here. We can send out these instructions to you if you need them. All you have to do is send an email to support@jobcost.com, and we can send you all any and all of these instructions for entering this different information into our system. So those instructions I just showed you would show you how to enter the time cards for your special items, and it has to be done before the last payroll of the year. Another thing that got added to the special instructions this year was the instructions for adding the FFCRA wages for the W-2. So if you had wages for the Family First Coronavirus Act, and you paid employees 80 hours for being sick at their full pay, or 80 hours of 2/3 pay, or any time they took off to care for a family member, you have to follow these instructions to get it on to the W-2, because it has to show on box 2, code 14, W-2 box 14, code FFCRA. These are instructions that are on our website that gives you detailed instructions on how to enter these. And you will calculate a $0 check in the software, and then you will on the W-2 when you run the W-2s. This has to be done prior to closing out your year, just like all the other special earnings. Again, these instructions are on our website. Instructions for entering FFCRA wages and visual contract. So after you've entered all of your special items and you've completed your last payrolls of the year, your last payroll of the year is based on your check date. So it's your last payroll that is dated in 2020. So if you have a pay period that ends on the 26th and you pay it on any time before the 31st or on the 31st, that would be your last payroll of 2020. Now, if you have a payroll that say ends on the 27th, and it normally wouldn't be paid till January 1st or 2nd, and you want to put it into 2020, you can date your checks on the 31st, as long as when you build your time card header, that you put it in the correct check year and check quarter. So if I'm going to build a time card header, and let's say I want to build it for 12/28, and I want to make sure that it goes into 2020, then I'm going to make sure my check year says 2020 and my quarter says the 4th. If I'm building a time card header, for example, let's say 12/31, it's going to try to throw it into the first quarter of 2021. So depending upon your pay date in your control file and admin payroll controls, what day of the week that you normally date your checks, the system will automatically try to throw it into what it thinks is the correct check quarter and check year. You can change this when you're building your time card header file just by simply overriding it to the 4th quarter of 2020. Now, one thing our system will not let you do is when you go into print check, it will not let you use a check date that is greater than the year that the pay period date is in. So it checks the check year, and if you have a check date you're trying to date them in 2020, but your time card header file says the check year is 2021, it will not let you do that. It will tell you that it needs to be in the current year. So as long as you can override this check date to be whatever date, to be 12/31, 12/30, whatever you want it to be, even if your week ending is January 2nd, and you want to force that into 2020, you can do that by simply, when you build the time card header for January 2nd, by simply changing this to be the fourth quarter in 2020. So after you have completed all of your paychecks and entered all your special items, entered your FFCRA wages for the W-2, you would then follow our checklist for the calendar year end. And it pretty much gives you step-by-step instructions on what to do. You're going to print your fourth quarter reports, which are under Reports, Payroll, Quarterly. You're going to print your year-end report, which are Reports, Payroll, Year-End. And it shows you step-by-step. You do the 941, you do the SW2, you do the federal unemployment, state unemployment. You can print all these to PDFs and save them. That's what we recommend you do versus putting them to paper. The electronic 1094, 1095 forms that you see at the bottom here, those can all be done later using the employee history file along with the W-2 forms. You should print the W-2 totals report for the year, and you should examine it to make sure that everybody's W-2 totals look accurate. And you can just give a brief glance to make sure everybody's wages and everything look correct. Now, this does not show you their special earnings if you added any special earnings. You can print your W-2 forms to paper the first time and just to review them. And that will show you if there's any special earnings. Like here is a code C with $20. And we do recommend that you do this and that you can review, especially the employees that had the special earnings, so you know that they got in there properly. But the actual printing of the forms and the actual printing of the 1095, 1094C forms and the electronic filing of these forms can all be done in January, sometime before the end of January when they're due. We also have calendar year-to-date reports that you can print out for your information. There's also fiscal year-to-date reports. If this is the end of your fiscal year, then you also need to print those reports as well. It also tells you to print the monthly reports, which would be whatever you use, you normally, on a monthly basis, whatever reports you would normally print. And then the miscellaneous deduction report, that will show you all of the deductions that have been taken out for the year for each employee. It's always handy to have that for the year in case you need to go back and look at something. Once you're done printing all these reports, you can back up and zero out the calendar year-to-date totals. That is done in admin, payroll, year-end. Back up year-end employees, zero year-to-date totals, and clear 1095C information. So the 1095C information is stored on the employee file under the year-to-date totals tab. You'll see the 1095 information that you had for 2020, if you have entered it in. Now, sometimes most of you may not enter this in until you're in the history file. But if there was anything entered in the current year, it will zero all these totals out for the new year of 2021. So doing the backup takes a picture of the employee file, their earnings as they stand at the time that you made the backup, at the time that you ran that step. And it puts it into a history file. So under File, Payroll, Employee History, you can select from a drop-down what year you want to look back at. And you can see what their employee file looked like at that time at the end of the year of 2015 in this particular case. This is what the earnings were. This is what the 1095-C totals were for that year. You don't lose this information. It just makes a copy of the file and puts it into our history. You can still get to it, but it's no longer the current data file. So it goes, the zero step goes out and zeros all of these totals, zeros the quarterly totals here, zeros the year-to-date column on the deductions. Now, your maximum and your accumulated columns on deductions do not get zeroed by the zero step. The zero step only does the year-to-date column on this screen and does not do the maximum or accumulated. So if you need to change that, you need to manually come in here and zero out or change these totals. So once you run this step, it'll default to the year of 2019, which obviously was last year and not 2020, which is what you want to zero. You actually have to use the drop-down arrow and choose 2020. You may not see 2020 because it may be up, it may be hidden up above. If you have a lot of years in this drop-down, 2020, you may have to go up a level to see it. You may have to move your cursor up to see the 2020. And when you say okay, it's going to give you this message. And it's going to ask you, or warn you basically, do not proceed unless if you will be processing more payroll checks dated 2020. This process cannot be undone. So you have to be very sure that you want to do this. If I say yes again, it is going to, this one has no pay periods, but it should ask me again it won't let me do that with unposted pay period. But it will ask you a second time, are you sure you want to do this? Are you sure you want to zero this step? Again, it's a little scary because it can't be undone, but there's always ways to go back and add things into the employee file. If you zeroed and realized you forgot to add something, we have ways to go in through the back door and add things to last year's records for the W-2. Once you've done the zero step, then the next step is to make changes to your federal and state tax table. That is done in admin, payroll, tax tables, federal. Now these have already been updated for this company, but I will show you the instructions for the released tax table. So it shows you right here where to go, admin, payroll, tax tables, federal. We still have a standard exemption showing because even though there's a new W-4 out for 2020 where they do not use the standard exemption, you probably have a handful of employees who have never filled out a new W-4 and are still using the old version prior to 2020, which did use exemptions and did use deductions. So the standard exemption is still in play here. And these are the updated rates, as you can see by the tax tables that are posted on our website. This one did not get updated, but the new Social Security limit is $142,800. The federal withholding status extra Medicare, additional Medicare, is $200,000 for a single person, and it's $250,000 for married filing jointly. The 401k limits did not change this year. And as far as we know, the federal unemployment did not change this year either. The 401k limits, usually they increase those every year. This year they did not. They stayed the same. So then moving down to over to the single tab, I guess these weren't updated. So the single limits have increased. So all you do is click on the first column. You're going to put in the 39.50. I'm just using my down arrow or tab to go over to the next columns. Change this to 13,900. The percentage stays at 12. Now the blue number in the middle is the one that's going to change, and the one that you want to make sure changes to whatever you see on our tax table screen. So as soon as I change the amounts here, that number in the middle changes to 46.44 for the tax dollars. Now the percentages did not change, just these amounts did, which then changes the number in the middle to match what the government posted on their website. You can save that in between if you want to, going to the Married tab. And then on the Married tab, again, you click in the first box, and you're going to change it. I'm just hitting my tab key and going through, and it's updating the number in the middle. Now, it is possible to make a typo. So if I added an extra number, all of a sudden my number in the middle went way more than what it's supposed to. And then I realized, oh, I put an extra character in there. So you can come in and change it. They're not set in stone. Head of household also came back last year as an option again. They had gotten rid of it for a couple of years. So we do have head of household amounts to put in. And those will show up on the new W-4 forms for 2020. Most of the older forms did not have that in there for a while. Okay, so once I'm happy that my tax tables match, I can hit save. And that is all I need to do for my federal tax table. Then I would go to my state. Now, we only publish the Illinois state tax tables because that's the only ones that we usually get information on. You can normally find other state tax tables by going, like if you're in Indiana, you can go to in.gov and you should be able to find their tax tables, or if you're in Wisconsin, wi.gov, or any other state.gov website should give you what their taxes are. Now, as of this date, we are not aware of any changes to the Illinois state tax table. They still don't have the Illinois 700T for 2020 out yet, as far as I've been able to tell. So under admin payroll tax table state, because we have multiple states listed here, you need to use your binoculars and you need to look up the state of Illinois. And then if there are tax table changes, this is where you would put them in. The exemption, if that changes, would go here. And then the single tab is the percentage along with the married. And it's done the same for the last couple of years. And it is the same for both single and married people. Again, if there are, when we do notice of any changes, we will put out another alert to you and update it on our website, telling you that there is a new tax rate for the state of Illinois. Also in this email, we have a link to the publication 15, which is the government circular E, which is where we get our tax table guide from. So you're welcome to look at that, to read through it. You know, might answer any questions that you have about the taxes and the tax tables. But this link will take you to the website, to the current publication 15T for use in 2021. And they will go over all the new stuff about the new W-4s and anything else that you may need to know. Okay, getting back to our checklist, once you've made your changes to your federal and state tax tables, you are ready to go for your new payroll for 2021. Then you can start entering your time cards and your pay for the new year. Now, on the calendar year-end checklist, there are steps for accounts payable, receivable, job cost, and general ledger. These do not have to be done right away. These can be done sometime in January, February, March, whenever you're ready, or after you've closed December for these modules. After you've closed December and before you close January, you should run these reports and do these steps. Now, as a part of the accounts payable close is you're supposed to print the 1099 and the 1099 miss forms. There is dates as to when those are due by. So you don't have to close AP to print those. You can print those before you close out the fiscal year. But you do have to have W-2s and the W-3, which is a crystal report in our system, to the employee, the paper forms by February 1st, and the paper forms to the IRS by February 1st. Or if you file electronically for the W-2s, that also has to be to the IRS by February 1st. For the 1094, 1095C, all paper forms must be to the employee by March 1st. Now, most people would give them to the employee at the same time that you give them the W-2. Only makes sense. Why would you, if you mail the forms, why would you mail two separate forms? So our recommendation is to do them at the same time you do the W-2. If you're filing those forms by paper, you have to file them to the IRS by March 1st, electronically, which is also known as that AIR system that they use. That is by March 31st of 2021. So if you're doing 1099 NECs or 1099 miscellaneouses, the paper forms are due to the recipients or to the employees or to the non-employees by January 31st. Paper forms to the IRS by January 31st, and electronic filing for over 250, not required that you file electronically unless you have over 250 NEC forms or 1099 NIS forms. Those are by March 31st. Now, the state of Illinois does not require you to file 1099 forms electronically. So I don't even believe it requires you to file paper forms to the state of Illinois. But you should double check with your accountant to make sure on that. So after you've completed everything on the calendar year checklist, if it's your fiscal year end as well, then you have some steps in the fiscal year. And there's some payroll steps. Zeroing the fiscal year totals is an important step because that will then make sure that on your employee file, in your year-to-date totals, you have calendar year hours and earnings, and you have fiscal year hours and earnings. When you run the first zero step, it only zeroes these earnings out. It does not zero the fiscal. So you have to run the zero step for the fiscal year. Now, if it's not your fiscal year, you should run the zero fiscal year total step at the end of your fiscal year. So if your fiscal year is September 30th, then after your last payroll in September, you should zero out the fiscal year total so that you're accumulating the correct totals here. Otherwise, if you run it at calendar year, your fiscal year is not the calendar year, you're always going to have earnings in here that don't belong. So that is done in admin payroll year-end, zero fiscal year totals. Now, once you run that step, it doesn't have the warnings in it that the year-end, year-to-date totals does. So once you click on that, it pretty much just, I think it asks you what year, and then it just pretty much does it. So there's no, it just asks you if you want to zero it, and then it does, for the current year, whatever your current year is, it zeroes all those totals. So it doesn't give you the warnings for some people, fiscal year totals are not as important as the calendar year. So it doesn't give you all the warnings. Again, it can't be undone, but it doesn't give you the warnings to make sure that you're positive you want to do it. But after you've done the 2 payroll steps, that again, the accounts payable, receivables, job cost, and general ledger steps can be done at any time after you've closed the month for the fiscal year in all your modules. These are the special earnings for the employer-sponsored health coverage, which again, you can determine from your accountant whether or not you need to make these entries.
Yeah, we don't have to make them.
So the W-2 forms can be done sometime in January. You don't need to do them immediately before you do your first payroll. You can do your first payroll because you print these get printed from a history file. So the history file, which is employee history, that is what the W-2 program reads, or will ask you when you run it, which file you want to come out with. So if you were running your W-2 forms, it'll basically defaults to the current year, but then you would change it to whatever the history file is that you wanted to run out of. And that's where it would pull the information. So they will, you should review them before you print them. The forms that you purchase from us, you will need to print them either 4 times or 6 times, depending upon the number of copies that you have on your form. So in here, basically, it's telling you that you're going to select whatever year you want. You're going to put in the Social Security limit. And we've put that in our instructions here for what it was last year, because I have a hard time remembering what it was. So I'm sure you guys would too. You can also, after you put in your limit, you could just print it for a certain couple of employees if you needed to. So there is a new option on the W-2s about truncating the Social Security number. So if this is unchecked, it will not truncate the Social Security number. And the IRS does not, on their red forms that you file with the IRS, they do not want that Social Security number to be truncated. But new this year, they have said that you can truncate it on the employee's copy. So on the copies that you send to the employee, you can truncate those forms. So you will come in here and have to run this like 4 to 6 times. When you're printing on the employee's form, you can check that box now, and it will just show the last 4 digits of the Social Security number. So that in case the employee loses it, or it gets lost in the mail, or, you know, security thing, they don't want other people to be able to see it. But when you print the first red copy that goes to the government, they need to see the entire Social Security number, so you need to leave that unchecked. So basically what that would look like is, here is the new truncated Social Security number on the W-2. It would look like that. And then he has all kinds of special earnings that you see here showing up in these box 12. So again, we recommend that you print these to the screen and maybe a set of paper just to review them before you actually print them on the forms. Because forms are limited, you normally ordered enough forms to print your W-2s as much as you needed to. We can order you additional forms if for some reason the forms are wrong or they don't print correctly, but it's best to be safe and print them to paper, make sure that everything looks right before you waste the actual forms that you're going to print them on. So it does say that in your instructions here. We might recommend that you print your W-2s on paper first. You have a limited supply. You don't want to print the forms incorrectly. If you feel confident with the way they print it on paper, you should load your forms into your printer to print the W-2s. Now, I always recommend that unless you're very familiar with your printer, that you test how the forms are going to come out. Some printers, you have to have them face up, some face down. When you print them on paper, put an X in the upper left-hand corner of your first page and see where that ends up on the form. And that'll give you an indication of how you need to load the W-2 forms into your printer. Again, you need to print them multiple times, one for each copy that you need, once for each copy that you need. And you may reprint these forms at any time too. If somebody didn't get theirs or it changed and you need to redo just one or two, you can come in here and reprint these for one employee as many times as you need to. And of course, if you have any problems or questions or they're not printing right, you can contact customer support. On the 1095-C for employees, that, like I showed you before, is on the year-to-date tab of the employee file. And normally you'd be going into the employee history file. And you can check the box, and that makes these all become active. And you have to put offer codes in, which the government has listings in their documentation. You put an amount. If it's for every month, it would just, you fill in this all 12-month column, and it will fill it in all the way across the board. Or if it's not the case, you would just go into each particular month and put in whatever amount and whatever code. If they only worked for you for a few months or only had insurance for a few months, you can manually go into each one. Now, we also have an Excel spreadsheet that some of you have used that you can import. And we discussed down here, further on in this document, about the import. So the manual entry is on the employee history screen for these 1095 fields. So I just went over all that. You can import from this Excel file that we have. And if you want the Excel file, it's usually called 1095-C XLMS or CSV. We can send you the file if you're interested in doing that. But basically, it's a workbook that will go out into we'll link to your data, go in, bring all the employees in, and the amount of their insurance deductions, if they had insurance deductions, or employee health insurance. It'll go out and bring in the amounts for each month that they had. And then there's an import option in File, Payroll 1095-C Import. You can import this Excel sheet and it will automatically fill in from the spreadsheet these amounts, the offer codes, the safe harbor codes, and the employee share. Now let me just pull up that spreadsheet real quick so you can see. All right, here is the master Excel sheet. The yellow highlighted fields are the fields that you're going to fill in. So the payroll year you would enter would be 2020. You want to have the employee checkbox to print 1095-C. So what they're talking about here is this checkbox right here, print 1095-C. You want that to be checked. The drop-down arrow is a yes or a no. Offer of coverage code, which is your offer code field. Here we have the different offer codes that you can choose from. Now, if people will have different offer codes, like you're not all going to be the same code, then you would leave that blank and manually fill that in. Or you could have it fill in with the offer code that you use, or that you most use, and then change it. Here is the amount that you would put in if you wanted the minimum value of coverage to be a certain amount. Or you would just leave it at 0. And then this is a safe harbor code. Again, you could put it in. It will fill it in for all the months, but you can change these codes easily just by clicking in the field and changing them. And then when you hit once you have some of this information in, if you hit the skip data button, it will go out and pull in the amounts for the health insurance for each month. So this is something that support can help you set up and run if you're not comfortable with doing it. But once this is filled in with all your employees, you list all your employees here and all the insurance that they paid for those months, you can import it into these fields here. And then you would, of course, need to double check to make sure that the imported the correct information. And then you could print the 1095 forms without having to manually come in and fill all these out. Now, to print those forms, it's under the year-end 1095, 1094C form. So this, again, you can select the tax year. You can select for an employee. You can select to print instructions or just print one set of instructions at the end. And again, you can truncate the Social Security number for the employees' forms, but not for the forms that you're filing with the IRS. The 1094 form is kind of like a summary, kind of like the W-3 is and the 1096 are, where you get a summary page of all of your 1095s. And that will, you fill in the contact information and phone, and that will do a summary of everything that you've put in and give you a printout. Now, the electronic filing of that is, there's an electronic file here for 1095 and the electronic file for W-2. These create in the format that is uploadable to the website, and they get saved wherever your payroll directory is set in your computer. So you have under admin, miscellaneous controls, you have data directory paths. So it's going to go into your payroll directory, whatever that's set to, or it might go into your import-export directory depending upon which, what file you're doing. Some files, I know the 1095 is set to the payroll directory, and I think the W-2s are set to go to your import-export directory. Sometimes those could be the same directory, sometimes they're a hidden directory. So it's going to be in either one of these two places when you create those electronic files. We do have information in our README, which this is a link here from our website to our README document. Once you have the README open, you can search for employer-provided health insurance offer coverage. You just copy this and paste it in there, and it would take you to copy that first. If I copy this and I go to find it's going to take me down to where the instructions are importing this from the Excel workbook. So that is an option for your 1095. This just shows you the import dialog box for importing the form. This shows you how you should use the default and what you need to fill in on the parameter screen. And then these gives you the instructions to print the 1094, 1095 forms after the year is closed. These forms print on 8.5 by 11 white paper. You do not have to purchase pre-printed forms for them. And then these again are the due dates. There are links here that you can click on and it will show you the due dates that we came up with or where we found the due dates to give you the information as to when those are due. If we have any new or additional information for you, we normally will send out an email blast. Like for example, whenever we find out when the Illinois state withholding tax tables have been released, we will send out an email blast. And normally it is posted then here. Like here's in the post about our tax forms being available. You can find all kinds of information on our website for instructions on how to handle things in our software, when to order tax forms. A lot of times even updates are now available. So here's an older one with an old update that was available. Doesn't look like the new update has been posted here yet. The new update is version 10.5.0. If you look on my screen here, my visual ContrAcct version is 10.50.0. That is our latest update with all of the changes for the 941, the 1094, 95, and the 1099 forms. So if you guys don't have that yet, you're on the list most likely to be getting it. They will be someone in support will be contacting you to schedule that update. You don't have to, you don't have to have it before you close your payroll out. So it's not an absolute must have it before you can finish your payroll for the year. You can go ahead, you can close out, you can start your new payroll for next year. You don't have to have this until before you're going to file your tax. So we've got a lot of customers to update with getting to you as much as we possibly can. So we're trying to do the best job that we can to get to you as quickly as possible. So we thank you for your patience on that. This kind of concludes the webinar for today. If you have any questions, please email the support@jobcost.com and we will answer your questions as quickly as we can. Thank you all for attending.